sages and demigods are placed into illusion. Only because of him do the material universes, temporarily manifested by the reactions of the three modes of nature, appear factual, although they are unreal. I therefore meditate upon him, Lord Sri Krishna, who is eternally existent in a transcendental abode, which is forever free from the illusory representations of the material world. I meditate upon him, for he is the absolute truth. Dharma pujita kaitravotra paramo nirmatsranam satam vedyam vastavamatra vastu shivadam tapatrayon mulanam Srimad Bhagavate Mahamuni Krite Kim va purer Ishwaraha Sadyo Hridi Avarudyate Cha Kriti Bihi Sususubhistaksanat. Completely rejecting all religious activities which are materially motivated. This Bhagavata Purana propounds the highest truth, which is understandable by those devotees who are fully pure in heart. The highest truth is reality distinguished from illusion for the welfare of all. Such truth uproots the threefold miseries. This beautiful Bhagavatam, compiled by the great sage Vyasadeva in his maturity, is sufficient in itself for God realization. What is the need of any of the scripture? As soon as one attentively and submissively hears the message of Bhagavatam, by this culture of knowledge, the Supreme Lord is established within his heart. Nigama kalpatarur galitam phalam Sukhamukad amrita dravya samyatam Pibata bhagavatam rasam alayam Muhur ahur rasika bhuvi bhavakaha. O expert and thoughtful man, relish Srimad Bhagvatam, the mature fruit of the desire tree of Vedic literatures. It emanated from the lips of Sri Sukadeva Goswami. Therefore, this fruit has become even more tasteful, even though its nectarian juice was already relishable for all, including liberated souls. Srimad Bhagavatam, Grantaraj, J, Chapter 1, Canto 1, Chapter 9, text number 43. Sutta Goswami said, thus Bhismadeva merged himself in the Supersoul, Lord Sri Krishna, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, with his mind, speech, sight, and actions. And thus he became silent and his breathing stopped. Purport by Srila Prabhupada. The stage attained by Bhismadeva while quitting his material body is called Nirvikalpa Samadhi, because he merged his self into thinking of the Lord and his mind into remembering his different activities. He chanted the glories of the Lord, and by his sight he began to see the Lord personally present before him, and thus all his activities became concentrated upon the Lord without deviation. This is the highest stage of perfection, and it is possible for everyone to attain this stage by practice of devotional service. The devotional service of the Lord consists of 9 principles of service activities, and they are hearing, chanting, remembering, serving the lotus feet, worshipping, praying, executing the orders, fraternizing, and fully surrendering. Any one of them or all of them are equally competent to award the desired result, but they require to be practiced persistently under the guidance of an expert devotee of the Lord. The first item, hearing, is the most important item of all, and therefore hearing of the Bhagavad Gita and later on Srimad Bhagvatam is essential for the serious candidate who wants to attain the stage of Bhismadeva at the end. The unique situation at Bhismadeva's time of death can be attained even though Lord Krishna may not be personally present. The words of the Bhagavad Gita or those of Srimad Bhagavatam are identical with the Lord. They are sound incarnations of the Lord, and one can fully utilize them to be entitled to attain the stage of Sri Bhismadeva, who was one of the 8 Vasas. Every man or animal must die at a certain stage of life, but one who dies like Bhismadeva attains perfection, and one who dies forced by the laws of nature dies like an animal. That is a difference between a man and an animal. The human form of life is especially meant for dying like Bhismadeva. Well, this teaches us the science of dying. There's a science for everything, including dying. And we have to practice in order to achieve this science, this level of scientific understanding. Just like you want to become a internet professional, you have to study and you have to practice. You want to become a violin player, you have to study and practice. You want to become a doctor, you have to study and practice. Always under the tutelage or instructions of experts. You want to learn how to die, you have to practice. Right? If you don't practice, you die like an animal, with no knowledge and completely confused what's going to happen next. But if you practice, and what is the practice? Regularly attending the classes, morning and evening. What else? Regularly chanting your rounds, good rounds, not inattentive rounds, but very attentive rounds, most attentive. And regularly coming to the temple, performing service, and regularly having darshan of the deities. So all these regular activities, just like this, self-control, self-discipline, and obedience. So, self-control means you follow the regulative principles. Self-discipline means you follow the practice of Krishna consciousness very strictly. No sleeping in, no slouching, no what you would call skipping important activities. One has to be regulated in Krishna consciousness as the self discipline and self-control. One has to not put themselves in a tempting situation by which they can fall down. There's so many things that require self-control. So one pulls back from seeing or hearing anything that is suggestive of breaking the 4 regulative principles. Okay, so this science of quitting the body, the topmost level is called nirvikalpa samadhi. When one merges oneself into the thinking of the Lord. Now, that doesn't mean you lose your individuality like the Mayavadis. They also merge. But their merging is different than the devotees' merging. This merging oneself into thinking of the Lord and remembering the Lord's different activities and also chanting the glories of the Lord, then you'll be able to see the Lord practically. So you don't see the Lord by bribing someone with a lot of money. You don't glorify the Lord by making up your own poetry or making up your own things. And you don't in any way force the Lord to come by some mystical power. The only way is to surrender completely to the Lord, to this process of hearing and chanting and thinking, desiring to please the Lord, and then actually acting. So there's thinking, feeling, and willing. 3 psychological, let's say, determinations that one makes before acting. So one must be thinking of the Lord always, feeling how wonderful it is to be in the service of the Lord and the association of devotees and pure devotees like Prabhupada and so forth. And then being convinced that you must do this. It's absolutely necessary for your life. Just like some people think that they must save money and build up their savings account or 401k, or they must do this thing or that thing. Well, the devotee must be convinced that Krishna consciousness is the only way to solve all the problems of life. And what are the real problems? Is birth, death, old age, and disease. So if you want to, just like you could be the richest man in the world, but if you have bad health, that money doesn't really help you. You know, you're going to die. So health, in other words, health of the body and mind are prerequisites, in a sense, to having the ability to constantly think about, desire to please, and actually act in devotional service. If you're not healthy, then you're disturbed and your attention sometimes goes away from the Lord. The best health is achieved by following the regulative principles, and by which you develop self-control, self-discipline, and obedience to the instructions of Krishna and your spiritual mentors. So this nirvikalpa samadhi, merging the self into thinking of the Lord and his mind into remembering his different activities. So how do you think of the Lord? Regularly attending class. If you regularly attend class, then you'll be thinking of the Lord. And you'll be reading also. And there's always homework to do when you have a class. And there's repetition. One learns by repetition and understanding principles. Like one time my job was to translate Prabhupada into French. And he was speaking in a big program at the Olympia Theater in France in 1971, and I had to translate. And he understood I didn't know French that well. He said, I will speak very slowly, he said, and give you short sentences, and you just try and translate that. He understood I didn't know French that well. And he understood also I didn't know the philosophy that well, because I was just a new devotee at that time. But he said, I will speak very slowly, and you just translate and give you short sentences, and you translate. And then he said, if you understand the philosophy, then you don't have to translate every word. You translate the thought. So he was giving me practical information how to translate in about 30 seconds. So that's the whole point. If you understand the basic concepts of the philosophy, then you can remember them. If you don't understand the philosophy and you're trying to memorize every word, it's almost impossible. But if you understand the concepts, and then it's not difficult to translate or remember, right? It's the important is understanding the concepts. So here he's saying, and in order to understand the concepts, it requires constant hearing and repeating. And what comes after that? Shravanam, Kirtanam, Vishnu Smaranam. Then you can remember Lord Krishna. Smaranam. If there's constant hearing and repeating. So, then it says, this highest stage of perfection. This is the highest stage of perfection. Because one is thinking of the Lord, remembering his pastimes, and chanting his glories. And then what happens? One actually sees the Lord. One concentrates on the Lord with unflinching deviation, and then one actually sees the Lord. So Prabhupada says, this is possible for everyone. It is possible for everyone to attain this stage of perfection by practice of devotional service. So what is devotional service? Shravanam, Kirtanam, Vishnu Smaranam, Padasevanam, Archanam, Vandanam, Dasyam, Sakyam, Atma Nivedanam. These 9 processes that define what is devotional service. And first and foremost is hearing, Shravanam, and then repeating, Kirtanam, and then remembering the Lord and serving the lotus feet of the Lord and worshiping the Lord and praying to the Lord and making friendship with the Lord. Right? And then surrendering everything to the Lord. This is the process. And if we do this on a regular basis, then you not only fix your mind on the Lord, but you actually see the Lord also, always. So, everyone can attain this stage by practice of devotional service. Any one of these processes, or all of them, or any combination of them, will make one Krishna conscious. Just like Maharaj Yudhisthira attained perfection by hearing Sukadeva Goswami. And Sukadeva Goswami attained perfection by repeating or chanting the glories of the Lord. So any one or any combination or all, if they're of these processes, if they're done, one becomes Krishna conscious. So, but Prabhupada says, but they require to be practiced. They require to be practiced persistently. That's a very important word, persistently. That means every day, and in fact, every minute. Under the guidance of an expert devotee of the Lord. So that's another prerequisite, absolute prerequisite. Under the guidance of an expert devotee of the Lord. And Prabhupada says the first item, hearing, is the most important of all. So you have 9 processes, but this hearing on a regular basis is the most important. And therefore hearing of the Bhagavad Gita and later on Srimad Bhagvatam is essential for the serious candidate who wants to attain the stage of Bhismadeva at the end. So one can attain this stage that Bhismadeva attained, even though Krishna may not be physically present. Why? Because Krishna is present in other ways. He's present in the Mahamantra. There's no difference between the vibration of his holy names and Krishna himself. He's present in Bhagavad Gita and Srimad Bhagvatam. Srimad Bhagavatam is considered the incarnation of the Lord in Kali Yuga. And Bhagavad Gita also, because the Bhagavad Gita is Krishna speaking himself, and Bhagavatam is Krishna's pure devotees speaking about Krishna. So Prabhupada says these 2 transcendental literatures are identical with the Lord. They are sound incarnations of the Lord. A sound incarnation, right? And one can fully utilize them to be entitled to attain the stage of Sri Bhismadeva. What does that mean? Fully utilize them. That means we shouldn't waste our time reading anything else or hearing anything else. We should just concentrate on these 2 books. And that's enough for it's enough for many lifetimes, especially this lifetime. So what's the purpose? That we have a temple like this. Why? So that you can sit down comfortably without any external diversions and focus completely on hearing and chanting and remembering. And then that translates into serving the lotus feet of the Lord, worshiping the Lord, praying to the Lord, making friendship to the Lord, and so forth. So that's why, when we do have class later on in the day, there's so much noise, there's so much interruptions, and we should be very attentive to stop it. Right? I'm not saying you do it, but little kids are running around. Parents think the temple is a social welfare place where you can come around and hobnob and let your kid run wild. No, this is where you have to train your kid not to run wild, and to learn to listen. And you have to learn to listen, and the kid should be sitting right next to you all the time, listening. Learn to listen with focused attention. That was Narada Muni. He sat down and listened. He didn't engage in playing tag and running up this staircase here and running across the temple and running around down that staircase, or running around like this and then going down and running around through the Vishal, and then running up again and then running through. This is all nonsense. And the fact that we let it happen in the temple shows that we are not aware of what the purpose of the temple is. The purpose of the temple is not a free-for-all for little kids. It's supposed to train kids to listen. And adults also have to be trained to listen, but they're responsible to train their kids to learn how to listen attentively. Because if the kids, every time they have a little bit of a recess, they just run around and play tag, that means that they have not been trained. They have not been trained properly. It's when they sit down and they listen attentively, like Narada Muni did when he was 5 years old. In other words, there's no excuse. The kid can be 3 years old or 5 years old or 15 years old. There's no excuse why they should run around wild in the temple. They can run around wild in the school, in the playground. They can run around wild in your house, break things and throw things and open the window, throw things out. That's okay. If you want that, that's okay. But in the temple, they should not be allowed to run around wild. So we better have a meeting again with all the parents, at least the devotee parents, because the devotee kids are the ones that run around the most wild. It's not the kids from the outside. The kids from the outside, well, some of them are as wild as the devotee kids. We see the Telugu school kids, they run around wild as soon as they have a little bit of a recess. And we're going to have to train people, especially the parents. The whole purpose of class is to learn to listen attentively. And if you learn this, then you can learn very easily the whole philosophy, because that constant hearing and repeating, and then there's remembering. This is what they do in a madrasa. This is what they used to do in the Sanskrit tikis, the schools. Teach you how to stick, and just like, you see the dance teachers downstairs. They have a stick, or they have some symbols, and they go dig, 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 and the kids have to move. And then if they don't move properly, she scolds them. I've been watching the teachers. That's the way they teach them. The kids have to focus. Well, same thing in the class, and even in our like a Hindi class in our Vedic school, oftentimes the kids are doing nonsense in the class, and the teachers are not controlling them. You see? So we have to wake up and understand what we're trying to teach kids. We have to teach them respect, self-control, self-discipline, obedience. Those are the 4 things. Then they can learn. Without those 4 things, they're not going to learn very much. Okay, and then these scriptures are the sound incarnation, Bhagavad Gita and Srimad Bhagvatam, are the sound incarnations of the Lord. And one can fully utilize them to be entitled to attain the stage of Sri Bhismadeva, who was one of the 8 Vasas. Every man or animal must die at a certain stage of life, but one who dies like Bhismadeva attains perfection, and one who dies forced by the laws of nature dies like an animal. That is the difference between a man and an animal. The human form of life is especially meant for dying like Bhismadeva. Haribol. Srila Prabhupada. So, you organize a meeting, we have to have an istagosi. Purpose of the istagosi, bring all the parents with their